I'm Teisha Bader with Shalom TV's news update for Monday, November the 25th, 2013. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said today that he will be sending an Israeli team to the U.S. next week to work on the final status nuclear agreement with Iran. This follows an interim agreement announced this weekend between world powers and Iran, which Netanyahu yesterday called a historic mistake. Netanyahu told the Likud faction meeting held this morning in Israel that he spoke with U.S. President Barack Obama last night and agreed that an Israeli team led by National Security Advisor Yossi Cohen will go to the U.S. to work on the permanent accord. Netanyahu said this accord must bring about one outcome: the dismantling of Iran's military nuclear capability. He said that the interim deal reached between world powers and Iran was bad, but would have been worse without Israel's diplomatic efforts. President Obama had called Netanyahu last night from Air Force One to discuss the agreement. The White House released a statement reading, "The president told the prime minister that he wants the United States and Israel to begin consultations immediately regarding our efforts to negotiate a comprehensive solution." The president underscored that the United States will remain firm in our commitment to Israel, which has good reason to be skeptical about Iran's intentions. Yesterday, Netanyahu warned that the deal reached with Iran would make the region more dangerous tomorrow than it was before. In the interim deal reached late Saturday night after ongoing talks in Geneva, Iran agreed to curb its nuclear program for a time period of 6 months in exchange for limited relief of sanctions. The Iranian agreement will be a subject of upcoming programs here on Shalom TV. And Jewish organizations here in the U.S. have begun to react to the deal with Iran, among them the American Jewish Committee, who said that while they appreciate the efforts of the P5+1, the elements of the agreement with Iran need to be understood more fully, citing Iran's history of defiance and deceit. They said the true test of the agreement will be the ability of the world powers and UN agencies to verify Iranian compliance to the agreement, and that existing sanctions against Iran should stay in place in the interim, and new sanctions should be pursued to implement if needed. The AJC's statement read, "Tangible deeds, not poetic words, will ultimately determine whether Iran has embarked on a new path of cooperation and compliance or is pursuing the same aggressive and destabilizing policies which pose such a threat to regional and global security, simply wrapped in new packaging." The Jewish Council for Public Affairs said Iran has done little to deserve the trust of the U.S., and while diplomacy was preferred to military action, they support President Obama maintaining that no option should be taken off the table. JCPA President Rabbi Steve Gutto said the interim agreement has the potential to serve as a valuable stepping stone to a final agreement that can serve the long-term security interests of the United States, Israel, the Middle East, and the entire international community. Such a final agreement, Gutto said, must not leave Iran in a position to continue its drive for nuclear weapons capability or to be able to restart it with ease anytime in the future, adding as well that economic pressure remain on Iran until a satisfactory final agreement is in place and compliance verified. And World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder voiced skepticism about the deal with Iran. He said Iran must be judged by its actions, not its words and promises, because they are not worth the paper they are written on. And French news agency AFP reports that Canada will keep its sanctions against Iran in place for now, calling for a more conclusive accord. Canadian Foreign Minister John Baird said tough sanctions would be kept in full force until negotiators reach a permanent agreement, because he said Iran has not earned the right to have the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, the Associated Press reports that according to Israeli media, Netanyahu knew through Israeli intelligence of the U.S.'s outreach to Iran months before President Obama told the Israeli Prime Minister about it, when the two leaders met at the end of September. The AP said Israeli media reports suggest that Israel's intelligence services were already aware of the administration's secret talks with Iran, which reportedly had begun about 7 months prior to that September meeting. But senior U.S. officials have told the AP that this past September was the first time Israel had been formally notified about them. And turning to Israeli politics, chairwoman of the Hatnu'ah party, Tzipi Livni, called for the forming of an ideological alliance between her party and the Labor Party, following the earlier announcement today of the alliance formed by the Yair Lapid-led party Yesh Atid and Beit HaYehudi, or Jewish Home Party. Livni made the remarks at the Knesset caucus today for the resolution of the Israeli-Arab conflict, where she said the time was right to forge an alliance to support Prime Minister Netanyahu. At the caucus, Livni said that Israel is facing a twofold challenge over the next 6 months. One, to realize a permanent agreement with the Palestinians that will benefit Israel, and to guarantee that the international community will not risk Israel via an agreement with Iran. Relating to the interim deal made this weekend, Livni said the agreement made with Iran is far from perfect, but it is a done deal. So now's the time to rehabilitate and consolidate our relations with the U.S. Israel kicked off its largest joint military exercise yesterday, as we have been reporting to you, together with forces from Greece, Italy, and the United States. The Israeli Air Force began the largest joint military drill in its history. The IAF said the exercise has been in the works for over a year, and its goal is to examine the group's general aerial capabilities, not focusing on any specific operational situation. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro said, "We live in a tough world and dangerous world. Israel lives in a dangerous neighborhood. It needs the best trained forces and it needs allies." The drill, called the Blue Flag exercise, will run through Thursday of this week. Israel's medical team has left the Philippines after 11 days in the typhoon-ravaged country. The 148-person IDF emergency team left the field hospital today after treating 2,600 patients. The team conducted 52 surgeries and delivered 36 babies. They are being replaced by a delegation of the European Union. Apple confirmed today that it has bought the Israeli startup company PrimeSense. PrimeSense provides motion tracking chip technology and 3D sensing. That technology was used to help power Microsoft's Xbox Connect 3D system for the Xbox 360. Israeli business Daily Globe says the purchase price for the Israeli company was in the neighborhood of $350 million, and that Apple will embed PrimeSense's technology in the smart TV, which is scheduled for launch in 2015. And tonight's primetime lineup for Monday evening, November the 25th on Shalom TV will include at 7, Dr. Ruth Westheimer speaks to the problems single women often face in relationships on the wisdom of Dr. Ruth Westheimer. At 8 p.m., ADL National Director Abe Foxman sits with Gary Rosenblatt of the New York Jewish Week to talk about hate and anti-Semitism on the Internet, which Foxman details in his new book, The Dark Side of the Internet. At 9 p.m., Israeli Consul Shachar Azani offers an Israeli perspective on Jewish life, and at 10 p.m., Israel's Finance Minister Yair Lapid sits with Charlie Rose at a fascinating evening from the 92nd Street Y. And immediately following at 6:30 p.m. tonight, Mark Golub will address the deal reached this weekend between world powers and Iran on In the News. That's tonight here on Shalom TV and ShalomTV.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Monday, November the 25th, 2013. I'm Teisha Bader.